Hello folks, this is Ralf with Stray Benzes. I'm bored out of my mind, trying to practice social distancing. And you know what? Then I thought, why not use the time to come up with something for you guys who love old Benzes and like to get into a hobby, but don't necessarily know what to look out for an old 123, 126, and sometimes even 124 Benzes. Here in particular, I have a old 300 SDL from '87, and here I can show you a couple of things to look out for when buying a used S-Class Benz. It doesn't really matter whether or not it's the first or second generation of the S-Class back then. It is usually more related to what's under the sheet metal than the exterior, because this is the top number one issue. Most folks go by the looks, and yes, don't get me wrong, the paint, the sheet metal, the rust, that's definitely a huge issue, but underneath there is something where, beneath the sheet metal is where a lot of money will go later on. And that's, I think, that one lesson that I can honestly say I've learned. There is no more expensive Benz than a cheap one. Here are a couple of things to look out for that are absolute money pits if you see them. Alright, so the exterior of the Benz, obviously there are some paint and other cosmetic issues. When you look for a Benz, there are a couple of external things to look out for besides of if the sheet metal and the paint is okay. Here it is no longer okay. There's a lot of flaking, so that is already one that is well abused and not worth an awful lot of money. As if it is at least technically maintained then and safe, that's another thing. Usually you can already see there are issues with dashboards being cracked, but one thing I can tell you to look out for is this thing here, the sunroof. What to look out for with the sunroof is make sure it tilts open, it retracts, opens and closes. If that thing is stuck or otherwise malfunctioning, the brackets are no longer available brand new, and if they are expensive. The used ones, if the pick and pull ones, everybody knows how much they're worth. Really good, well-functioning ones are very expensive. The best video I've ever watched is one from Ken Baxter from Mercedes Source. That helped me fix the sunroof on this one. Don't touch that thing unless you know what you're doing, because right next to transmission and engine, that is the most expensive part of the car. If that doesn't work, you're in for a ride. How about a couple of other things? Another frequent flyer are the wheel wells. Here, this side looks good. Sometimes it's the chrome. If you see rust blisters under here from underneath, that chrome is going to be shot. This is usually right there where the water returns from the water and hits right here. So that's a frequent one. This wheel has already been repaired once before, so this is a well-worn and used and abused example. That one is due for another wheel well repair. Then the doors. If you see crumbs like this already laying there, you are in for a ride, because the doors most likely are like they're crumbling. Pretty expensive to fix. Then the other frequent flyers are these, the door stops. Most of these, if they're 30 plus years old, they're usually in need of replacing. They're fairly cheap to exchange, but rainwater that comes in through the gasket typically dripples on them in the mechanical part, and the springs lock up and they break, and sometimes they break in not a convenient position for you to fix. Another thing, the electrical window regulators and electrical windows, the motors. Motors are frequent flyers, not so much the switches, but usually the up and down mechanism. These are all things on my channel that I've put on there, how to fix them, how to put them back into good shape. But you usually end up having to take the door covers off and get to them. Sometimes it's the motor, sometimes it's the window mechanism, and sometimes it's the door stop right there. Leather is usually an issue. Here, this one looks pretty good. Obviously the newer style, most of them are torn on the seat covers, the center console. The other thing that's really expensive is usually the wood. Here it has a couple of surface cracks, not too bad, same there, but those are all very expensive accessories. The same thing with the seats. If they are worn, you're in for a little bit of money there. The other thing, the climate control. Oh man, anything from monovalve to this electronic control, they're usually not working right. There's another video for that I've got. But before you know it, you have another $1,000 going into this stuff before you turn around. Just a really good example of these can usually run you anything between $200 and $600. So get the best example of a car that you can get. Hidden behind here is another climate control thing where you have the internal temperature controller that has a fan motor in there that pulls the air through the internal temperature control sensor. So that one is tough to get to, but cheaper to fix. What are some other things? Well, here are the seat controls. I do a upcoming video about seat controls, and a couple of other frequent things that go awry, because typically here the headrest, usually people bust the plastic clip that holds these in position, and that one will not be able to go up and down anymore. You'll find a video clip on that very, very shortly. Another hidden issue might be here. It's not hidden, or it is not visible. Damage to the cover that covers the vinyl cover here of the B pillar. They usually either bust completely and are just hanging around here. Same thing with the seals of the door. This one looks pretty good. Here's another very frequent item, the power mirror on the passenger side. Most of them have stuck motors. There's a video about how to fix that one. They're pretty expensive. The power mirrors usually come with heaters. In temperatures and colder temperatures, touch the glass to see if it gets warm. If it's not, then that part is no longer working and replacement is difficult to come by. Another very frequent flyer is the seal down in here. You can barely, if at all, see it, but it's the seal on the glass to the body. But that's a part that is easy to replace. The other frequent flyer that we have, and it's a very cautionary tale, is this: the delamination of the window. It's usually coming hand in hand with rust right here. Here it looks pretty good. Underneath it's pretty good. If you open up the trunk and you touch from behind where the sheet metal is and you find rust, hands off of that one. Frequent other one is the edge here, as well as condensation or water under the deck lid. Here it's dry. But sometimes when you just tip this open after a rainstorm and you feel like there's water coming and dripping down into the interior, the most likely culprit is either the gasket or there are small little holes here that sometimes are no longer plugged. But that deck lid, if that's not sealed right, you'll have water in the trunk. Another frequent one is water down in here in the back. Sometimes you have to remove this, and in most cars, where when you open up the trunk and there's water in there, you will actually smell it. It's kind of like a musty odor coming out of there. Take the left and rear covers off and inspect the wheel wells and the trunk for water and corrosion. But that's another very frequent one. Make sure that the drains are unplugged and that you don't have anything stored in there. All right, more on the corrosion side. The fenders have one spot right here at where the bumper is on the side. There's a fastener on the back side where sometimes the rust starts. It isn't too bad if you catch it early, but if you don't, you will definitely be looking at a lot of money replacing or repairing this one. Another no-go is when you open up the covers for the car jack and you see rust or like worse holes. Hands off, because these things do rust from within, and if it's visible outside, you don't want to be underneath a darn thing on jack stands, because that thing is most likely going to be toast. That is a true sign that this thing is done for and not worthwhile saving, repairing, or restoring. Another very frequent one are the brakes. The rotors, they're not necessarily special, but they're a pain to get off of the wheel hub, because this is so massive that they're bolted on from behind the hub, which means you need to get the hub together with the rotor off in order to get to the rotor to replace it. Most of these will have rims that have quite a bit of road rash and corrosion and some other not so nice things. This one is really a good example. Looks good, but and the lug nuts look okay. Make sure that those are in good tip-top shape, because they are not cheap to replace, and they very often people will put rims on that are the wrong ones from the W124, or some people also take the 140 type rims on there. Not the right thing to do. Make sure that the tires are less than 7 years old. There are enough videos on there how to tell the age of it. And lest I forget, the brake calipers, the front as well as the rear ones. The brake calipers will lock up frequently, especially as you wear down the pads. Once you're about down to a quarter of the quarter of new, they tend to lock up on you. C's, they're notorious for that one. The replacements that you can get nowadays in exchange for your core, they're not painted, so they corrode right away if you don't treat them with some paint, so that's not good. And very often the rubber hose, the brake hose, is porous or cracked. It's another thing that's neither safe nor will you get that thing through state inspection. And if you're unlucky and you bust the brake line with a brake fitting to the hose, there's another couple of $100 just to fix that. So that's very, very, very expensive. Speaking of expensive, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with the suspension parts, front and rear. If they're loose, you'll sink in literally thousands of dollars, especially if you don't do that stuff yourself. If you can't do it, hands off of it. Especially the front suspension. There are so many parts. I mean, they went above and beyond of what most manufacturers did back then. They spared no effort to make the handling great, but especially the one big ball joint, that is very difficult to remove, very difficult to put back, and you might even risk busting the thing on the way back into its seat. But all things that can happen to you when you try to work on these machines. Most people don't care much about their vehicles enough to spend an awful lot of time cleaning it, maintaining it, changing liquids and lubricants and stuff like this. Now, this is a fairly okay example of what an engine should still look like without an awful lot of leaks. The brake fluid here is still okay. It's not super in terms of the color. It should definitely be just a tad lighter, but it's still okay. External leaks. This is an honest engine. There are some seat pitches but not really big leaks here, so that's a good sign. Your coolant should still be there. Should have a good solid color instead of rusty, like a dark colored. They don't usually come that way from the factory, so that's a good sign that this is a fairly okay example of an engine. The other thing that you need to double check is the oil cover. This does not have any sludge or funky stuff hanging off of it or condensation, so that's a good sign. Diesels always have black oil, motor oil, no matter what you do. This one is still okay. So with that said, you can only check on the tranny while it's running, but check the fluids, change it when you get the car. But and I go over the running of the engine here in a sec, but the other really expensive part is the transmission, just because the 722-3 transmission is something that is it's a nice transmission, 4-speed. The tranny overall is good, very robust, but tends to leak. And those leaks can drive you crazy. There are enough videos on the channel here too. Stay away from any that leave a significant puddle underneath there. That's expensive to fix. And if you have the tranny out, go ahead, get it cleaned, get it overhauled, get new O-rings. Not worth it to fix piecemeal. I can testify to that one. The Driveline is pretty solid, but the hardy discs, the rubber discs on the Driveline, they can wear and they can get really rock hard, and some of them are outright worn. Sometimes people mismatch the matching mark, and there's some Driveline vibration once they're done replacing certain parts on the drive shaft, on the prop shaft. Something to watch out for. There's another video for that one. Engine should start real without any without hesitation. We'll go over that here in a sec. So when you go on a test ride to buy something like this, make sure that the glow plugs work okay. There you go. Oil pressure builds up right away. Nobody ran the car, so the temperature is, this one was stone cold, so it starts right up without misfiring. The other important thing is you can always tell that a diesel is running okay. There is no smoke, and if there is, it's just ever so slight, but here is absolutely nothing, so that is what you want. It runs beautifully, idles nicely. You cannot check the function of the turbo while under no load. Once idles wonderfully. So we'll shut this thing off real quick, and to wrap up with probably one of the more notorious parts that go wrong on those, and that's this bloody thing, and that is the over voltage protection relay, OVP. That one is a frequent flyer in terms of having to replace it and causing for the ABS light to come on and some other parts. Another interesting thing, this has already happened here. The black part of the header of the original coolers, they tend to crack and to leak. When they do, you are on the way to having to get yourself a different cooler, because you don't want to get stranded while you're on the road. And that is overall pretty much everything there is that you should be watching out for when you get a used old Daimler in here diesel. So while you're at it and you're bored, check out a couple of my videos, and here, right here, should be the Benz symbol. This is how you subscribe to my channel. Would love to hear your feedback of what to cover next, since we're all going to be in for a rough ride here with the virus outbreak. And we get bored and we look up things so we can start working on our cars and beautiful German machines. Let me know. Leave me a comment, good, bad or indifferent. Give us a couple of suggestions what to cover next. A couple of other good channels are definitely Mercedes Source. I can highly recommend Ken's videos. He has got awesome stuff and awesome tools, and here I'm just trying to augment whatever I can do to keep these things on the road for a long time to come. Be safe, stay healthy, and happy wrenching.